Welcome to episode 43 of the POG Show, the Port Orange Government Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Springer, the Public Information Officer for the City of Port Orange. And today we're going to be talking about trees, specifically the trees here in Port Orange with our city forest. So we are joined here by two guests today, Steve Edgar, our city forester, and Roger Berta, our city forestry technician. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. I know there's been a lot of things in the news lately, like especially regarding prescribed burns, controlled burns, and questions about, we have a city forest and what that all entails. So I'm glad you're here to kind of talk a little bit about that and educate us a little bit about those two items there that have been pretty popular among some residents lately. But before we start, I just want you both to be able to introduce yourself. Roger, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about you and how did you get here at the City of Port Orange?
Yes. So I'm local, born and raised. Left for the military for a little while and traveled a little bit and decided I still love home. So I came back and started working heavy equipment, things like that, created my own business, and then transferred here to the City of Port Orange. Steve was kind enough to allow me an opportunity to work out in the forest, and that's where we're at now.
And Steve, you've been here for at least a couple of years now, right?
I was contract city forester for almost 35 years, and I spent about 4 years as a city forester working full time.
So, gentlemen, simply, what is a city forester? What does the job actually entail?
The Port Orange is rather unique because the city actually owns its water supply. It owns 10,000 acres, some of it in partnership with the Volusia County. And we kind of control our own destiny that way. Instead of buying little pieces of land to put wells on, the city decided to actually buy the property where they could maintain it. It became the city forest. We have about 21 production wells. Then layered on that is a forest management. We raise timber. We're growing along rotation poles is our final objective. So we plant and harvest trees. In 1998, when the bad fires happened, we lost almost all our timber. They swept through. People that have been here a while probably remember all the smoke. But almost the entire forest burned, and we started over. So that's what happens when you allow an ecosystem that normally burns every 3 years to grow up and become have an ecosystem that hasn't seen fire in 20 to 30 years. When the winds get bad and the drought occurs, you end up with bad wildfires that people can't contain. Very similar to what's happening in California right now. Fortunately, they just got rain.
And part of that management is those prescribed burns that you all do. But just to backtrack just a second here, so where is the city forest exactly? For people who may not be familiar, when you say Port Orange is a city forest, you're trying to direct them to it, where exactly is this? And this is a conservation area, right? This is not something that the city is going to develop or build on. This is a conservation area out west, correct?
That's correct. It's west of Tomoka Farms Road, south of I-4, and north of Pioneer Trail. There's a big wetlands called Tiger Bay, and we have the eastern side of Tiger Bay under ownership.
And is it a partnership with the county too, the Hunt Club, or who else kind of has access or is able to use that land?
Well, it's protected because of the well fields. We have layered other uses that don't conflict with the major use, which is water production, which would be timber, wildlife. Very similar to the way a national forest is managed, only without so many lawsuits. We do have a wetland mitigation bank, and we have a gopher tortoise relocation area, and it's fairly profitable. The city council mandated that the forest be self-supporting, so between the income from the timber and the hunt club and the tortoise relocation and the wetland mitigation bank, we've managed to do quite well for the city.
And you two have the job of managing that 10,000 plus acres out there, making sure that there's not too much invasive species happening there. It's being managed properly.
That's correct.
That's correct. Roger can explain. He's been very instrumental in catching up on our invasives.
Yes. So we have, with the prescribed burns in the last roughly 2024-25 season, we've burned approximately 1,000 acres, a little under 1,000 acres. And we've dissed fire breaks used for fire management.
Those are when they dig into the ground, essentially, correct?
Yes,
to make
I
those
plow.
tunnels.
I use a large tractor and plow disc lines throughout the forest, just in case of a wildfire incident or a lightning strike. It will help us to manage that situation as it occurs. It'll kind of chopped into blocks, and so that way it doesn't run away throughout the forest.
And Steve touched upon it a little bit earlier, but kind of what is the purpose of these prescribed burns? Why do we do these?
It really reduces the fuel load for fire. So if we do have a lightning strike or some type of wildfire that gets onto our land, the intensity will be much lower, and it won't spread as fast or as hard or be as hot.
So
Continue to travel.
You could put it out with a fire hose without a huge effort. It's Florida used to burn about every 3 years under native conditions. The Indians would actively control burn because it's a necessary part of supporting wildlife. If you've ever walked through heavy palmetto, it's exhausting. When it's overhead, you have to press your way through. That's a very unnatural situation. The palmetto should be below your knees, and we are just getting most of the forest to that point. Most of the city-owned forest.
When you go into these prescribed burns, kind of what is the game plan that it entails? How do you decide when you do it? How much you do? Who's involved in that? Can you kind of walk us through kind of the steps of a whole prescribed burn and kind of the layout that goes into that?
Sure. It really starts with your management plan. We are trying to replicate what happened under native conditions. All our Florida wildlife are adapted to that. The deer and the turkey and the non-consumptive songbirds, they all depend on a 3-year burning cycle. So once that's objective is established, we need to burn most of the city-owned forest every 3 years. Then you come up with a plan. You've got to divide it into units, and then you've got to get the right weather. We have an interstate that runs to our north, so we need winds that blow away from the interstate away, keeps the smoke off of that, and then you've got to have fire breaks, like Roger was talking about. We establish fire breaks in units anywhere from 100 to 300 acres. We generally try to surround a swamp so that we don't have to worry about the swamps burning. Sometimes when they're dry, they do burn. And then you cross your fingers and you light a match. And every time you light a match, you're kind of taking your future into and there's a lot more attorneys than there are foresters, and so it's where you get gray hairs from if the wind shifts.
I do want to touch on we do rely a lot for support with our local fire department.
Oh, I'm glad
they
you
come
brought
out
that
and
up.
help us. They help us a great deal.
The Port Orange Fire Department.
Yes, the Port Orange Fire Department. They bring assets, UTVs, four-wheelers, all with water pumps located on them. So that way we can ourselves within the city manage our prescribed burns.
And you have to get a permit through the state too as well before you burn, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And then, like you said, it also depends on the weather conditions, the environmental conditions. So is there a time of the year that's more suitable for those burns than others, or is this something that can be done year round?
Absolutely. The winter season coming on into the winter season when we get those north winds, the large fronts out of the north. That's usually when we burn due to I-4 smoke management. Smoke management is really key when it comes to our burns because we're surrounded kind of by communities. The south is pretty wide open. I live to the south, so there's not that many people down there. But just recently we did the burn, and the wind was out of the west, and I know some of the residents could smell that. So we try and keep it to a minimum. We definitely plan on winds, and we do our best to keep the smoke minimized.
Is there a certain amount of acres per year? I know you said we're on like a 3-year cycle, but is there a certain amount of acreage you try to hit each year when you do these burns?
We need to burn 1,000 acres or more a year, and there's still parts of the forest that, especially some of our joint city-county lands, that really need fire. It's something that you never seem to catch up on.
Because you mentioned it helps reduce the fuel there. It helps also kind of manage invasive species as well too a little bit.
It does. It knocks them down. The invasive species is a touchy subject due to herbicide. We really maintain it using herbicides, although people don't necessarily like that word. They are from other countries, nations. They're brought in under exotics as whether it be on your porch or what have you. Long story short, you end up cutting them or throwing them in the trash, and they end up spreading. And they spread all over, and they've definitely spread into the forest and all over the state, and it's a real monetary issue for the state. But here in the city of Port Orange, we manage it as best we can.
And how do you decide which sections of the forest to burn and when to burn them? Is it just kind of by growth levels, or how do you determine where to do the burns?
We have burn units set up, about 25 different units, and they're on a schedule, and we try to burn them about every 3 years.
And then before the burn, do you go out and kind of like survey the area, or kind of what is the prep ahead of time before you actually go and do that burn?
Absolutely. So we review incoming weather. Even before that, though, we do go out and review each unit and see fuel loads, height of the palmettos, what the fine fuels are on the ground, and things of that nature, in order to get a total picture of how our burn is, how we're going to plan our burn, and how we'll achieve our goals for the said burn. Then
we'll disc the fire lines, the perimeter lines, a baseline, and then the interior lines. Most of our fires are backing. Now we've gotten to the point where we can start to use a little bit of flanking fire. Instead of backing against the wind, it's going sideways, kind of with the wind, and kind of backing. So it's a different intensity of fire, but we're starting to make some progress, and with lower fuel loadings, we can use a flanking fire.
With these fires, do you just let it burn itself out, or is this something that it's a kind of a burn in the sense where that the fire department will come in and say, okay, let's start knocking it down at this point, or how do you determine when to end the burn?
We have definite windows that the regulatory agencies allow us to burn in. Usually it's from about 9 o'clock till dark. So we need to have it out by dark. Our interior lines are spaced. Fire will back about a chain an hour, 66 feet an hour. And so that our lines are set up so that they're the right distance apart, and the fire reaches the next line and goes out. So it takes quite a bit of planning.
You know, you both have had a lot of experience with this. What's one thing you think the public doesn't know or should know about these burns that you would like to share with them?
They are crucial to keep 1998 firestorm or any extreme fire event from occurring, as clearly you can see in California. I just want to hit that home. It's number one, burning is very difficult. It's exhausting. It takes a lot of time and effort. And we're not out there doing it for no reason. It's to reduce the threat on population, and also to keep our forest beautiful. When you have a high intensity fire, like Steve stated earlier, you lose a lot of trees. It creates a lot of damage to everything. So with us doing it control, like us controlling, it's not so intense. We don't have any of those major situations.
Right, because as there's not maybe a lot of homes that are adjacent to the city forest, the goal is to make sure that if there is anything that happens, it stays within the city forest and doesn't spread.
That is correct.
Outside of that.
That's correct.
Perimeter.
A good example was the fires in 1998. The fires burned into New Smyrna Beach, and they burned into Daytona Beach, into the downtown business areas. But we were able to stop the fires and keep them from burning into the city of Port Orange because of our fire breaks and because of our previous burning.
All right. Well, I appreciate you gentlemen both for coming down and stopping by and sharing a little bit about forestry with us and those prescribed burns and educating us all on that in our city forest. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Roger, for coming down and appreciate it. And Mick, take us on out.